Hello, everyone, and welcome to the International Documents Task Force Annual Meeting titled Finding Deleted International Information. This session will focus on efforts to preserve international information, as well as how U.S. government agencies like USAID and the Demographic and Health Surveys have affected these agencies' documents and data. When we started preparing for this session, our intent was to look at how U.S. foreign aid cuts had affected IGO documentation. But it became obvious that at the present time, at least, it is hard to measure whether U.S. foreign aid cuts have negatively affected access to IGO information products. So we've shifted to international information in general, especially like from the agencies USAID and the DHS. We have a wonderful panel of presenters today. Our panelists hail from the Institute for Development Impact, Coherent Digital, LLC, and the University of Michigan. We will also hear from the former technical director of the now terminated Demographic and Health Surveys, or DHS for short. An open discussion will follow the presentations. It should be noted that this session is officially nonpartisan and all viewpoints are welcome. I'd like to introduce our first panelist, Dr. Azra Nurkic, who will be presenting the Deck Finder Archive. Azra?
Thank you so much, Michael. Can you all hear me?
I can hear you. All right.
Excellent. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Azra Nurkic, and I'm with the Institute for Development Impact, and presenting to you today the work that we've done to restore access to the development archive called, which used to be called Development Exchange Clearinghouse, which was curated by USAID over 6 decades and contained a significant amount of resources that were basically spanning all of the sectors in which USAID operated, and have since January 24th, when the executive order was introduced and then consequent dismantling of USAID, the access to this archive has ceased to exist. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see how I do this. Just one second. I usually don't use the...
It's down, write it down at the bottom. Hovering your cursor over the bottom should bring up a bar there, and it says share screen.
Yes, I see that. I just don't see an option of the particular screen that I'm trying to share. So we're going to just try and see what you...
I think it gives you the option to, when you bring it up, it asks which screen you want, and you have to click on the screen you want to show. You're muted. Azra, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. Maybe, Michael, I can share a link to a screen that I'm trying to share, which is a live link. So,
sure.
So maybe you can help me with this, because for some reason, my Zoom is not allowing me. It says open system settings. Yeah.
Oh, the joys of technology.
Yeah.
If you want, I can share my screen, and I can bring this up and share my screen.
I think that would be good if you can do that, because otherwise it's going to make me quit this meeting and then come back into it.
Okay.
So if you can do that, that would be great. And then I can just tell you when to advance.
Okay, sure. Can everybody see the screen?
Yay. Okay, that's visible. So I'm going to just warn you that it has some interactive features. So when you move to the next one, it kind of has to go slow. So thank you so much for assisting me with this. All right. So basically, Deck Finder is a publicly accessible archive, which we're now maintaining for with free access to anybody who wants to peruse this information. And it contains over 111 or 100,000 111,000 documents, apologies, that are curated from the deck. So just a little backstory, we didn't know that the deck was going to disappear, and we didn't really intend to save the deck when we tried to, when we were scraping the archive. In fact, we were working on an AI tool that was supposed to democratize access to knowledge and help particularly small global NGOs access learning from the decades of US government's work by using AI technology. So in October of last year, we released access to what we're calling the Cipher, which is basically that AI tool that has agents that specialize in certain aspects of development work. And we released the Cipher, first leaning on 13,000 documents from the deck. And those 13,000 documents were 13,000 evaluations of USAID programs. Now, after the release, or since the release in October, there was a significant amount of interest for the Decipher and the work that we did into building that and making it accessible. And people requested that we actually expand access to go beyond the evaluations and to increase the knowledge base for the Cipher to include the entirety of the deck. So in December and January, we started scraping the Development Exchange Clearinghouse to download all of the documents that were there that were significant. There were about 200,000 documents in the deck in the Development Exchange Clearinghouse, of which about 156,000 were meaningful documents. Others were, documents that maybe had some ghost presence. But of the 156,000 documents, there were real documents in the archive. Only about 110,000 were the documents that actually were meaningful for this kind of knowledge. So we excluded things like notes from the minutes of the meetings or notes from conferences. So the Development Exchange Clearinghouse that you're seeing here, the Deck Finder, contains the documents that are from that database that have either, a certain amount of policy value or programmatic value or other sort of research value to the development community. So what we designed Deck Finder for is to basically restore this access to the documents that we serendipitously just ended up downloading in the second week of January, right before Deck was going to go dark. So we ended up with these documents. Now, the documents that we downloaded were meant for a different purpose. They were meant to feed the AI and to teach the AI module. So some documents don't really contain the PDF format that they were originally in, because we were primarily focused on safeguarding the actual content or to scrape the content to teach the AI development knowledge. Now that the purpose has changed and that we were basically left with this responsibility to restore access to these documents, we have since done quite a lot of work to make these accessible. So if you scroll up, let's look at the next slide really quick.
Yeah, scroll down, I guess.
Yes, okay. So, so again, given that this was done for a different purpose, what we needed to do to restore this access is to basically rebuild a certain structure, architecture behind the database to make the documents again accessible. So we had to reclassify metadata for human use and not for AI use only. And then the DEC, or Development Exchange Clearinghouse, was notoriously known for its difficult search engine. So we did some work to improve the user experience and to enhance search features and basically to enable real-time insights. Now, one other thing that we've done since, because we released the Deck Finder sometimes in February, and since then, a lot of people came to us contributing additional documentation that we didn't have. So since that original release, We have received nearly 7,000 additional documents that we didn't have, which we're now working to also ingest into the database and make accessible. Now, again, because these documents are coming from individual contributors, these 7,000 plus, these documents have to have the metadata and everything else to be cataloged appropriately so that they can be joining the database. So if we scroll to the next slide, I want to just talk to you a little bit about what's in the database in terms of the type of information. Okay, so zoom back out. Okay, so here you can see what we have in here. About 36.5% of these are actually studies and literature reviews. The second most common type of document in the archive is the evaluation reports and summaries. Then we have, and if you hover over any of these, you should be able to see how many documents. So studies and literature reviews is 38,153 documents. For the evaluations, it's 25,816. Then for performance and grant reporting, we have 13,000+ documents, and then assessment documents, quite a significant archive of those, 7,886, and so forth, with technical guidance documents, project and program design documents, other implementation planning documents, USAID official agreements and records, audits and compliance oversight, and program and activity overviews. So quite a significant repository of the history of USAID is contained here. And if we go to the next one, again, zooming in, let's just take a look at the subject matter of these. So majority of the documents have are focused on HIV or AIDS, which is basically PEPFAR primarily, so dependent on the type of funding that USAID had. So if you zoom in a little more, that glitching should be fine. And then maternal and child health documents, and then agricultural research, food security, economic growth and development, basic education, also a significant number, agricultural development, family planning, other sort of agricultural economics, governance, and many other documents that are in lesser numbers. So these are just the highlights of the most common types by subject. And in terms of the next slide, in terms of the years, so just to give you a quick snapshot on when these documents were produced. So the scale here is incremental by 1,000 documents. So as you can see, majority, I mean, it spans the full spectrum from 1958 through today. And, you know, there were certain spikes of activity in terms of contribution to the deck, but this is basically when certain documents were uploaded onto the archive. This particular graph is also interactive, and we can leave with you the link so you can play with this information as well. And let's take a look at the next one here. This is, again, looking at the type of organizations that were contributing. And, you know, if you hover over the barcode bars here, we can see. So, so basically, depending on how many documents came from which particular sub-agency. So USAID more generally, 4,000 documents. Then the next one is from the Bureau, if you can hover, of Global Health, and so forth and so on. So this is like really kind of showing you which particular bureaus contributed how much of this information that we possessed. And then last slide that I want to show you is the one about the geographic coverage. So here you can see where do these documents come from. Obviously, they were produced as a result of program investments. So depending on whether the document was basically focused on, you know, particular country. Here you can see that a lot of them are in sub-Saharan Africa. Also a significant number come from the Latin America context, and then India, Indonesia contributed quite a number, and so forth. So it's a pretty comprehensive global archive with a significant amount of resources. Again, maybe something else before I close here to emphasize is that Institute for Development Impact is a small organization, and we ended up with this huge responsibility to safeguard access to this information, and we're doing our best to work around the clock to maintain free public access to all of this information, and are looking for partners, people who are interested in supporting and sustaining this effort. And I'm going to just leave it at that and close here. Michael, I'm sorry I took a little more time than you wanted me to. And Michael, you're on mute.
Yeah, I was trying to get to the unmute button. Yeah, no worries. So thank you, Azra. Our next presenter is Toby Green from Coherent Digital LLC. He will be talking about the company's Open Collection 2025. Toby, take it away.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'm going to try and share.
I'm going to stop sharing.
There we go. I hope you can see the Open Collection there.
I can see the page, yes.
Great. Okay. So a little bit of background. When the Trump administration sort of took office and started removing a lot of content, we thought that we ought to step up to the plate and use our tech to see if we could keep some of this content accessible. And so we started to recapture content, trying to anticipate where content would disappear, but also work with the community to bring in the content that they may have in private collections or on their hard drives and so on. So we've now we've got, as you see here, we've got content from 77 different organizations, and we're up to about 390,000 items that we've captured. We've captured a lot of content from USAID, and I'm working with, in fact, the previous webmasters of USAID, who are working with people who work for USAID offices across the world to make sure that that content isn't lost, because they had a lot of local websites. And so we've currently got, I forget exactly how many documents we've got from USAID. Yeah, we're up to 9,300. We're currently processing another 10,000 documents, well, between 8 and 10,000 documents that have just arrived from this network that we're currently processing, and we'll be adding them to the USAID collection that we've got. But say we have content from CDC, from EPA, Department of Education, and we've been not only going after and looking for content from organizations that sort of whole entities that have been threatened, but we've also been looking for content. We have a technique where we can look for content that has particular keywords, so that we can try and recapture content, particularly DEI type content that the Trump administration is selectively deleting. Now, our effort isn't just focused on the US. Other countries are cutting back their aid. I mean, the UK, for example, historically has been a really big actor in the international aid sector, and they've been cutting back significantly, and other European countries have been doing the same. We think this is going to trigger an awful lot of NGOs to close their doors. And one of the things we do is we hunt for non-governmental organizations that disappear, and we recapture their content. So we keep their content alive. And in Policy Commons, I think we're up to about 800 organizations now that have closed their doors. We are really interested in hearing and learning about organizations that are perhaps going to have to close their doors or under financial stress because of all these cuts to government funding and to aid funding. so that we can recapture that content and keep it going. Now, the open collection, as its name implies, is open. We're financing this ourselves, and it does require users to register because we want to protect the collection just in case someone has a go at trying to actually damage it. So we require registration, but beyond that, there's no barrier. It's an open resource with our other modules. If you're not familiar with our other modules, we have big collection of think tank content, local government content, and world government content. We also have a collection in public health and social care. Oceania is a sub collection pulling content on the Oceania region, and it's essentially a product for customers in that part of the world. So that's what we're doing. Policy Commons itself, just to bring you up to date, we added 1 million records in May, and we're in the process of rebuilding all of the metadata using AI so that every item has a proper summary. This was something that was missing before, and so we hope that will improve the user experience. So that's my 5 minutes, and obviously happy to take any questions. And there's a document that Michael has that he will circulate. Thank you.
Yes, Toby sent a wonderful summary, which I will be circulating on ALA Connect after this session. Next, thank you, Toby. Next up, we will be hearing from David Thomas of the University of Michigan, who will be presenting on the ICPSR's Data Lumos archive. David, take it away.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Thomas from ICPSR. Hopefully yeah, I know Zoom is working. Okay. Anyway, up at the University of Michigan, we're a social science data archive. So, I actually have a presentation that I'm probably going to skip through, so you can get the presentation later. Because yeah, we're a data archive. Here's the thing I wanted to get to. Toby mentioned this also, that people came together, and we're one of those other groups of people, and through the data rescue efforts that came together and tried to coordinate and focus on different efforts and figure out where to get data, who had data. Much like Toby said, some people had data like just on their machines or here and there, whatever. No one was really prepared for this. So that was an issue as well. Luckily, as I said, we're a data archive. So in some ways we were prepared for this as far as like infrastructure and everything like that. So we did that. This data rescue tracker, which is part of a broader effort, it shows you, who's doing what and the organization. So that was really nice. Some of the challenges we had around this were that, as we were doing these efforts, as we were, whatever the right verb is, doing this work, right? I think all of you saw this too. Sometimes resources were coming down while you were trying to get them. So I've done other presentations about this, and I referenced the whole idea of like, you remember seeing hackers like in movies, and like, we all know programming doesn't actually work like that, but they're working against time. And this is one of those rare instances where we were working against time, where you could see changes happening right as you're trying to get the information. So it was this weird race against time, and I don't really like that. Specifically, right, to the IGO experience, some of the challenges we've had just in connecting with people in different organizations has been who has the power or rights to enter into sharing agreements with us, like who owns these data, even though they're publicly available, who can say what can be shared and how. Also, comes down to storage and transfer of files and the number of files. We created a site called Data Lumos just sort of for this eventuality, back in maybe 2019, I don't remember, probably 2019. for getting this data, getting government data that might come down, because the government doesn't have actually in its mission a mission of like storage and preservation. And then another issue, as other people talked about, is that in some cases, people at other organizations are not sure they're going to be still at that organization or if the organization will even be there. So we create a site called Data Lumos, like I said. And so, yeah. I'm going to bring you to, because I think I have another minute. Maybe I don't. And I'm not going to mess around with this because it just takes too long. So yeah, this is the Data Lumos site. Here you go. You can't see it. This is the Data Lumos site. So yeah, and then it's back at toward the end in January, it had about 100 items. Now it has over 689. So yeah, lots of people like you, like those people in this meeting, have been working hard in rescue efforts. And this is ours is, yeah, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of work that we hadn't planned on, but it's good work and we're happy to do it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, David. That was great. Our final panelist today is Dr. Livia Montana, the former technical director at the Demographic and Health Surveys programs. Livia, take it away.
Thank you. So I just have a couple of here, and just to say, of course, presenting as myself, unaffiliated here, was a DHS program for the last years, and also had a previous stint with DHS for about 6 years. And, you know, I would say I built my career on the DHS. So it's especially, you know, heartbreaking what's happening now. Just to say that, you know, and building off some of what what ICPS talked about, one is with the demographic and health surveys, use data sets, is that we don't really have a clear ownership documentation. We all operated, and I would say that's the case, you know, back about 40 years, countries owned their data because fact co-financed the survey. USAID were putting in less and less resources into DHS surveys. And so that was always our basis for operation, but unfortunately, it wasn't really, and there may be various reasons it's the case, but it really presents a big dilemma now. What's happening is that there are tools that are still available. The website is running. There's a stat compiler, which is like a database, you know, of index that you can run. It's still going. I believe that is going to, there are discussions where some bridge is going to be, is going to keep the DHS website running. The USAID logo may need taken off. You know, that's, I think, lots of discussions happening. And the micro is really what is at issue here. The micro was basically frozen and the program was put on the stop work notice, and that was January 28th. So since January 28th, if you do not have permission to access microdata, a given survey or many surveys, you could not get it. And so that is still the case. So that is frozen. But if you have access previously, you can't go on and download data. This program has always had the rights to distribute the microdata. And so that is what basically needs to be renegotiated at this time. I want to just highlight that we put out a paper recently, a paper moving towards equitable infrastructure and research integrity, determination of the DHS program. We argue that we need to find a path forward, and we need country ownership at the core, but we need to imagine how data sharing can happen in an environment where we could threats to continuation of data. That could be obviously government, but it could also be governments where surveys have taken place. There is an urgent need for that. You know, every bill, I would say, kind of up in the air. ICF, which is the company that was the contractor for the demographic and health service program, has not fully closed out the DHS program contract with USAID. Part of the decisions that have not been concluded are the microdata acts and how that can continue. Apparently, there is some question about, even though the assumption has always been that countries own data, there is some question about how that can be involved, and then how can use agreements be renegotiated. Some new entity can once again provide access to the data, own their data, and so they could share it, but most countries do not have the setup or the, you know, to actually serve up data on websites. I just talk very briefly about some of the efforts. There are efforts to address closure of DHS. It's such a major source of information. There have been a few events, and there's another event coming up starting tomorrow. There's a webinar on June 11th and June 25th about the disappearing DHS data, disappearing. But there have been a few efforts. So one, Global Development Incubator, they held a workshop on safeguarding publics to bring together a small group of people to discuss in which we could move forward, try to find approach to maintain and continue public good data. There's also a Secretariat Working Group on surveys. This is a UN organization. They have a time frame, but they do have taken on the task of work to assist countries, help evaluate the situation, fundraise, and try to forward the work of the DHS program, and also work to help coordinate a new way of making data publicly accessible. The Population Reference Bureau held a convening also on the future of DHS. There should be a report coming from that. And then finally, the workshop that I mentioned, where Joe is hosting discussions about the loss of DHS, so the field might move forward in a sense. So I think I will stop there. We have time for questions and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Livia. Well, that concludes the presentations, and we're now going to the open discussion. So does anybody have any questions for the presenters? I'll go first. It's worth noting that the demographic and health surveys was a vital source of statistics for all kinds of programs globally. In terms of in some countries, it was the main source of data for a lot of health metrics, the kind of thing that shaped national policy. So, Livia, I guess my question is, can this be replaced, or are we in trouble?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do, you know, I think that what is right now is a bit of fracturing, and it's not they're going to come together. There were about 25 surveys interrupted by the starter in January. Many countries have actually proceeded to go and conduct their surveys on their myself, and there are actually other initiatives as I am actively working to try to reimagine how forward and how we could read the DHS program in a very different funding with a more global approach. But I'm not the only one. There are others that are all going to enter this space. You know, given that there's no longer, you know, an RFP, you know, a contract kind of thing, it does make it difficult to see how a path could be taken to continue the decision. I think that loss is so great that I do, even if there are multiple efforts, I'm hopeful that there will be a future for abortion health surveys. It's in an environment of extremely strained resources. And, you know, I think what we're probably going to, at least in the short term, of the harmonization and standardization that this program brought to this. And so I think it remains to be seen, watch space, but I, you know, I'm hopeful that we're going to somehow way forward to not only continue surveys that have been, but also continue to collect data. I think the rescuing of data, I won't say that I'm not worried about. I would say that it's not quite the situation that many other public use data sets, you know, case for other public use data sets in the US. And that is, you know, ultimately the data is by the country. And so in theory, you know, or in reality, all of the countries, their data sets. And so it would be possible to negotiate data use agreements and actually kind of rebuild this archive in a way that would be publicly available, would not be, you know, to the major disruption we had one funder, USAID.
Okay, thank you, Livia. We have a question from Jenny Groom. What are you, let's see, I'm not sure who this is addressed to, maybe it's to the whole group. What do you see happening with the future of US administrations? What needs to be done to protect against future repeats of this? Will the gaps be too wide to fill? Jenny, was that intended for a particular panelist or just as a discussion?
No, it's for everyone. I think it applies to everyone. So you could tackle an easier question.
I was gonna try and
something, but yeah, please go ahead.
It's very hard to know what's going to happen with future US administrations, but what this is definitely calling for is some discussions around what the future of international development in particular should look like, and what are the lessons that can be learned from both the past experiences and some shortcomings that we are aware of as international development community, pardon. And also from this situation and basically the vulnerability, particularly of knowledge and historical record to these kinds of changes. So definitely a need for conversations about the future of international development to happen now, not in 2 years, not in 4 years from now, but now. And to have some honest conversations and reflections about international development and what has worked and what has not worked. There's so much evidence around what's working and what's not working. So we have all of the basis for that conversation to happen. And the mandate is definitely there. Now we just need some leaders to step into this space and start convening these kinds of gatherings where this collective thinking can take place. In terms of what needs to be done to protect against future repeats of this, I think that could be on several different levels. One is, again, on the strategic level around consolidation of knowledge and creation of redundancies of this kind of knowledge that comes from these different public spaces. We still have a very fragmented knowledge out there. International development is, being implemented since the end of the Second World War. And we have databases held by different institutions. Some are public, some are not public. There's a need to kind of think about how can current technology help with this, and also what is the institutional responsibility of other archives to safeguard something like this. So yeah, lots of still conversations to be had, and some backing in terms of funding needs to also be secured in order for this to not repeat. Over. That's all I have on that point.
Well, that was great. I think it looks like, you're talking about backup funding, it looks like we're gonna have to rely on private philanthropic foundations, something like that.
Yeah. I just wonder if I could sort of draw a parallel here in the journal publishing world. There have been great efforts to make sure that if a journal goes out of business, then the content is still maintained. There's locks and clocks, and there's a whole program to make sure that journal content isn't dependent on on a single site, if you see what I mean, so that if it does disappear, the content isn't lost. And I think in the world of grey literature, the challenge is that there is no equivalent of a program like locks or clocks. And so therefore the content is dependent. It's sitting on one website. It has a single funder. It is therefore incredibly vulnerable. And I think that what's happened in the last 6 months is just really bringing that to the fore and making it very visible. And I think that it's, and I think Olivia made the comment about having a single funder. That is always really, really dangerous, having a single funder. And so I think that there needs to be some sort of thought about, okay, well, how can we create an equivalent of a locks or a clocks? And if you're not familiar with locks and clocks, they're basically, it's an acronym for lots of copies keep stuff safe. The idea being that there is a distributed network that is funded by lots of different organizations in order to create a network where this content can be preserved. And I think there needs to be some sort of effort in the grey literature world to do something equivalent to locks and clocks.
Okay, thank you, Toby. We have another general question from Kathleen. So I'll just get my cursor to work here. Let's see. Who are the current, Kathleen, was this question another general for the panel for someone specific? It is, who are the current potential institutional / governmental allies outside the US government, Europe, the United Nations, the WHO? Is that a general question, Kathleen, or you have a specific presenter you're asking it of?
Well, maybe I could, Kathleen is coming for the DHS specifically, say that there are a number of allied kind of funders, because the funders fund the implementation of the surveys. And so fund the World Bank, FPA, UNICEF. WHO actually funds almost nothing for us. They certainly are a coordinating body, and they're very involved in ministries of health in the countries where it takes place, but they're not a donor. And so there are a lot of allies. I think the challenge for the DHS specifically is that there are sensitive data, and I know this applies to other data as well, but there are sensitive information. And so the way that the data has been handled all these years is that you have to apply mission. And so that process, there's a question about how can we continue to protect individuals who participated in, even though the data is anonymized, et cetera. But can we develop new, data model where we can still protect the individuals who participate in the survey, but then also provide access. And can we do that in a way that is maybe or multi-nodal, so that there are different locations around the world? That has been brought up a number of times, that it's not US centered. There are sites on the continent of Africa, there are sites in Asia, share data. And so that, at least in my case, I'm very interested in finding a way to have a consortium around the world and be, multi-donor supported that could make that the data is made available, revisit the terms of, the agreements and the process for that. But there still needs to be centralized coordination to be sure that the same data set is being across these different nodes. I think that's also something, for the DHS specific, we have to think about. But yeah, there are, many allies. It's, how do we come together and how do we identify the best way, best approach, the right way to do it, one right way. And so, so I think the current challenge is scramble to, to figure it out.
So I wonder, so another conference, some of you, like there's a conference called IASSIST that just completed. And I'm coming more from that, that kind of grouping of people. And I'm wondering, because I didn't go, so I don't know how much this is discussed in those IASSIST groups and circles, and if IASSIST has already been involved or no, I just don't know. But the point being, sorry, that like in my head, like maybe that could be some space to help that coordination, much like right, yeah, it's part of the data rescue project. Linda Kellum said that, was very involved in the data rescue project. Also, the US recently did this thing about their own federal government data with that single application portal. And what Livia mentioned sounds similar to that. ICPSR was involved in that infrastructure, building that up. It was not easy, but it was also worth it. So I'm wondering, maybe again, some sort of thing like that where you have those, different things. Someone also brought out that people aren't going to want to like cede power and stuff like that. So that's true. But yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, David. Just looking through the questions here. We have a very active chat bar going here, which is great. Let's see. So Azra and James Church are discussing the OAC Development Assistance Committee. Let's see. One question I have for Toby is, I read that back in late February, the USAID canceled 10,000 contracts around the world. Many of the entities that take up those contracts to provide services were, of course, affected by this. Have you seen have these NGOs come to you asking for help for preserving their documentation?
No. Sadly, not many NGOs seem to know that we exist and are available to do this work. We sort of have to hear it on the grapevine and then reach out to them or just go and fetch the content ourselves. But no, sadly, we don't. We're not well known enough to have people come to us. We are getting some, but it's very small numbers.
I'd just add maybe also that we have heard from individuals from within institutions that were international partners of USAID that were contributing those documents that I was telling you about in my presentation earlier, since we've collected additional 7,000 documents from individuals that are just trying to safeguard the information. Some are also basically, let's say, courses, training courses, or things like that, that used to be hosted on certain websites that are now not going to be able to continue because the contracts are related to hosting. So if it's something related to hosting, like, for example, all of the links, USAID had a very rich diversity of what was called the links. So biodiversity links, agri links, edu links, and so forth by different sectors. Those contracts mostly have stopped. There are some that have not been terminated. And for those, we have been in conversations with some of the knowledge, I guess, leaders within USAID to rehost these in some shape or form, because they contain quite a significant body of knowledge. If we cannot rehost them as separate websites, we're definitely already safeguarding the documents that were on those. But I guess, the problem that exists and will continue to exist is that, even though USAID funding has stopped, the need of the international community to actually preserve that documentation that was, of course, a mandate given by USAID originally is still there. So now nobody is asking the implementing partners to go and upload those reports anymore. And so the continuation of the value proposition that the deck was is what's also a significant problem. What will happen with the knowledge that we continue to acquire in implementation when there's no mandate to upload that documentation? Obviously, the mandate has always been limited to the US government funding, but that was a significant amount of that learning. Now the learning is not stopping, but the mandate to expand that knowledge is no longer there.
Okay, thank you, Azra. Ivan Flores, one of our attendees, writes here, several platforms offer robust features for nonprofit organizations, including constituent management, fundraising, grant tracking, and other essential functions. So among the viable options are Salesforce, Nonprofit Cloud, Boomerang, and Donor Perfect. So that's another thought. There's software available. We have another meeting starting in 6 minutes. So my last question is, we were hoping to find out what effect the $60 billion in US foreign aid cuts from the US government in recent months, what effect that had on IGOs and the documentation. Now, what I found in trying to set up this panel is there is pain. The UN Library in New York has 20% vacancies in terms of workers, and they can't fill them because of the funding gap. WHO is undergoing a major restructuring. And of course, we've talked about what happened with the USAID. Does anybody have any knowledge of say, is the UN having trouble archiving this documentation? Is it, if anybody, or the WHO?
Hello, this is Irina Lomelsky. It says Mary Glenn, but Mary was urgently called into a meeting about budget, which is, primarily what all UN is talking about. So yes, the funding in the UN is obviously a critical situation given several member states who are not paying their dues and not paying them timely manners. So the organization has launched UN 80 program of modernization, and that would involve some kind of reorganizations, etc., which is all in process. So yes, we have 20% vacancy rate in number of UN departments, and this I'm only speaking for the UN Secretariat. So, but DHL is not here. I don't think anyone from DHL is attending. Oh, Meg is here. Okay, so she could address that specifically for DHL. Then I could only address this for the UNI library platform, and so far we are continuing as before, and we maintaining the stream of data and publications that are being ingested. I'm yielding the floor to Meg.
Hello, everyone. My name is Meg Swatcha, and as a gentle reminder, if referring to me in the third person, my pronouns are they and them. I am the Scholarly Communications Librarian here at the UN Dag Hammarskjöld Library, which includes the charge of preserving for present and future users the documentation of the organization. We are, of course, deeply aware of these issues and are investigating different options, but we are doing so within the current fiscal constraints of the organization and the 20% vacancy in the library, specifically noted by our colleague Michael. So if folks have any questions about this, they are currently, they're very welcome to reach out to us directly, and I will put my email in the chat and do my best to respond in a timely manner. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Megs. And we are out of time. This has been a great, and Megs just put her email in there. We are out of time, so I'd like to thank all of our presenters. These were wonderful presentations. I certainly learned a lot. I hope everyone else did too. And everyone, please look out for a publisher and vendor update that I'll be publishing to ALA Connect and gov.gal and at least one other listserv. So I wish you all a great evening or afternoon.